For those of you who don't know what the CES letter is, I should really do a full telltale video on this, like on my main channel. But basically, the CES letter is something I didn't know about before. It's a letter. It's like 110 pages or something, written by a guy named Jeremy T. Runnels, and it was a letter that he wrote to the Mormon Church that he sent, or to the LDS Church, that he sent to them, and it was everything wrong with Mormonism, their doctrine, their everything. It was extremely comprehensive. I can't even believe I didn't know this existed. I heard about it from Mr. Atheist, from Jimmy. And, I mean, just kind of going through the table of contents here, we've got the Book of Mormon, issues with the Book of Mormon, issues with the Book of Mormon translation, the First Vision, Book of Abraham, polygamy and polyandry, prophets, Kinderhook plates and translator claims, testimony and spiritual witness, priesthood restoration, witnesses, temples and Freemasonry, science, other concerns, conclusion. It's really genuinely fascinating to me that that such a comprehensive thing exists, and then it's even got an epilogue. Like I said, it was originally written as a letter, and over time it basically was changed into a book. It's completely free to download, as far as I know. I mean, I downloaded it for free, and I didn't seem to hit any walls or anything, paywalls or anything. But you can buy a copy from Amazon. It may actually be worth it to buy a copy, because this guy put so much damn work into this thing, seriously. I would love to write something like this for Jehovah's Witnesses, but it's such a daunting, heavy task to do. I can't even imagine the time it took to do this. So anyway, I wanted to take a look at, last time we looked at the Book of Mormon and the translation problems and things like that. We covered stuff like, what are 1769 King James Version edition errors doing in the Book of Mormon, a purported ancient text? Errors which are unique to the 1769 edition that Joseph Smith owned. That's damning evidence that the Book of Mormon was fabricated by Joseph Smith. Damning evidence. So, I don't know. It's really fascinating. You you can read through it and do your own research on it and keep up with it if you weren't born a Mormon, or if you aren't a Mormon. It's a little bit more difficult to kind of follow, just because there's a lot of, like, culture-specific things in here that it's kind of hard to pick up on if you don't understand the culture and the language and things like that. But you can work your way through it. And like I said, it's probably worth the read. In fact, I may buy a copy on Amazon just to display. Maybe I can get Jeremy Runnels to sign it if he's still alive. I'm not sure. Anyway, I wanted to cover the Book of Abraham. So before we get into what the CES letter has to say about the Book of Abraham, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on it from my understanding. Bear in mind, some of this may be incorrect. I'm just kind of talking about what I've heard about it. If you guys want more information on it, a really good source for it is Brother Jake on YouTube. He's an ex-Mormon YouTuber. Really, really good guy. Really interesting videos. Love his stuff. Only issue with him is that he doesn't upload very often. In fact, he almost never does. But he does have a video on the Book of Abraham. So as far as I can remember from his video on the Book of Abraham, basically there's a traveling salesman who had some ancient texts, so like some tablets and things like that, I think. But they had like hieroglyphics on them. And Joseph Smith kind of lived on a commune at this point with some other like Mormons. And he got the community together to buy these texts. And he basically translated them, quote unquote, in his words, translated. They were hieroglyphics, I believe. And he he did facsimile drawings of them. So he had a kind of a newsletter or like a newspaper or whatever for his community, and he drew facsimiles of what he saw in the texts and put them in that paper so everybody could read it. So eventually, the texts that he quote unquote translated ended up getting lost to time. I think they were donated to a museum that eventually burned down and things like that. And actually, I think they were found later than they survived. I don't know. It's a weird story. But anyways, he made up this whole big story about what the texts meant, what they were translated to. And like I said, it's hieroglyphics. We now know, based on the facsimiles that he drew, that that is not what they meant. That is not how it read. But, you know, the Mormon Church has kind of fought that tooth and nail. That's a saying, isn't it? Fought that tooth and nail. I feel like that's wrong for some reason. Anyway, they've fought secular assessments of Joseph Smith's translation, quote unquote, of the Book of Abraham. But let's see what the CES letter has to say about it. If you guys weren't here for the last time I read the CES letter, it's kind of broken down into bullet points, pretty much. 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. And in this, we've got the facsimile drawings that Joseph Smith put in the paper so that people could see them and things like that. Of course, we have a lot clearer understanding of hieroglyphics now than we did at that time, just because we've got better archaeology and better technology, things like that. So let's just give this a quick read through the CES letter. Here's number 1. Originally, Joseph Smith claimed that this record was written by Abraham by his own hand upon papyrus, a claim still prominent in the heading of the Book of Abraham. This claim could not be evaluated for decades, as many thought the papyri, I feel like I'm saying that wrong, the papyri, were lost in a fire. The original papyrus Joseph translated has been found and, as stated in the Church's July 2014 Translation and Historicity of the Book of Abraham essay, scholars have identified the papyrus fragments as parts of standard funerary texts that date to between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE, long after Abraham lived. It says, we know this is the papyrus that Joseph Smith used for translation because the hieroglyphics match in chronological order to the hieroglyphics in Joseph's Kirtland Egyptian papers, which contains his grammar and alphabet of the Egyptian language, Gael. Additionally, the papyrus were pasted onto paper which have drawings of a temple and maps of the Kirtland, Ohio area on the back. And they were accompanied by an affidavit by Emma Smith verifying they had been in possession of Joseph Smith. In the possession of Joseph Smith. So with that last line, they're pretty much establishing how we know what we know about these specific pieces of papyrus. So here, that was number 1. Here's number 2. Egyptologists have also since translated the source material for the Book of Abraham and have found it to be nothing more than a common pagan Egyptian funerary text for a deceased man named Hor, around 1st century CE. In other words, it was a common breathing permit. I'm sorry, that's weird. A common breathing permit that the Egyptians buried with their dead. It has nothing to do with Abraham or anything Joseph claimed in his translation for the Book of Abraham. The Church admits this in its essay. None of the characters in the papyrus fragments mentioned Abraham's name or any of the events recorded in the Book of Abraham. Mormon and non-Mormon Egyptologists agree that the characters on the fragments do not match the translation given in the Book of Abraham, though there is not unanimity, even among non-Mormon scholars, about the proper interpretation of the vignettes on these fragments. Scholars have identified the papyrus fragments as parts of standard funerary texts that were deposited with mummified bodies. These fragments date to between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE, long after Abraham lived. Okay, so this guy just dealt a killing blow to the Book of Abraham. Just the facts that he laid out right here, alone, right here, just destroy the Book of Abraham. I mean, he's quoted the church as admitting that it isn't about Abraham. Like it never mentions the name Abraham or any of the events recorded in the book of Abraham. How do you come back at that? As the Mormon church, how do you respond to that? What do you say? I mean, it's pretty clear that you're screwed. They've just proven you wrong. You've just proven yourself wrong here. What do you do? How do you backpedal from that? Ultimately, here is my assessment of what the Mormon church did to kind of protect themselves from this CES letter. As far as I know, they address some of the claims and some of the points that the CES letter addresses. The Mormon church pretty much admits at this point, I think, that that Joseph Smith didn't, quote unquote, translate, capital T, anything. He didn't translate shit. He translated, quote unquote, with a lowercase t, which means interpreted. He looked at the words and felt what they meant to him and wrote that down. And that was what God wanted him to understand. Because we have the words that he supposedly translated. I mean, we have the papyrus that he supposedly translated in some cases. Completely different. We know the language. We know the language that's on the scrolls, the papyrus and things that he used. It's not representative at all of what it actually said. Completely different. So they basically get by it by saying he interpreted, he didn't translate. But honestly, like this entire CES letter is seriously a killing blow to the Mormon church. I don't understand. Like, the only way I can see people still believing all of this is if they haven't read the CES letter. I mean, that has to be it. They just haven't read the thing. There's no way you can read this and still believe it after. I guess you can just distrust all of modern science, all of modern archaeology. That's an option. But I don't know. At what point are you're just lying to yourself at a certain point. That's it. That's the bottom line. You're just lying to yourself. So this guy just delivers killing blow after killing blow through this entire thing. I would love to go through this whole letter. And honestly, I would really love to create a Jehovah's Witness version of the CES letter. But I don't know if I have the time in my life. Like, this is so detailed and intricate and well done. This must have taken the guy years to do. Years. I mean, just listen to this. Some of this stuff that we read from the last CES, the last time we addressed the CES letter. When King James translators were translating the King James Bible between 1604 and 1611, they would occasionally put in their own words into the text to make the English more readable. That's a factual claim. You can look it up and verify that that is factually true. That's just something accepted in the archaeology and the biblical scholar community. We know exactly what these words are because they're italicized in the King James Version. What are these 17th century italicized words doing in the Book of Mormon? Word for word. What does this say about the Book of Mormon being an ancient record? That is just a killing blow, plain and simple. It proves unequivocally, as far as I'm concerned, unequivocally, that the Book of Mormon was not translated, was not divined, was not given to Joseph Smith. He made it up. That is seriously the only explanation here. He made it up because he had the version of the Bible that these errors were in. I mean, exact word for word errors from the version of the Bible that he had just doesn't make any sense.